So the P2P and crowdfunding industries, they have been around in Malaysia for over 2 years. They've raised 344 million ringgit and they've also helped, fund 900 MSMEs. But there is this 80 billion ringgit gap. Why the mismatch?
The 80 billion funding gap actually is estimation by the SC. Why? I think the easy answer is that the banks in general, they are not so willing to lend the money to this startup with no track record. Even if they do, probably the interest rate will be tends to be high because it's high risk, right? So that's why there's a mismatch. Companies need money, but banks probably not willing to lend them money. That's why we have this gap. And the introduction of ECF and P2P is exactly to address this. Yeah.
So more and more SMEs are able to grow their businesses because now we have P2P, we have ECF. But then, let's say if I wanted to get into it, what are the red flags? What are the things that I should look out for? Because it's easier for larger companies. They have their reports, they have their earnings, but for SMEs.
You're talking about from investors' perspective,
Yes.
right? I think I spoke to some so-called, the P2P investors. Surprisingly, they are not too worried about the so-called red flags. They understand the risk. I mean, obviously it's a new startup with no track record. They understand the risk, but the thing about P2P and ECF investing is that the amount of investment is quite flexible. Minimum you can go as low as 50 or 100 ringgit. I mean, they don't, I wouldn't say they don't mind losing the money, but it's more like a investing experience as compared to buying into shares or unit trusts, right? Obviously, listed companies have great track record in general, but you don't have that. They can't find that good investing experience, right? If you go to the P2P website and all, it's very easy to understand. They just tell you. They didn't give you too much information. They just tell you, what do they do, how much money I need, and how much expected return you need. Whereas if you invest in stock market, right, there's a lot of all this PE ratio, cash flow, future projection, which is can be very difficult for people to understand. So yes, track record. Without the track record, actually, it's higher risk to invest in SME company as compared to a listed company, but. If I may put it bluntly, most of them, maybe some of them, they don't care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but what does this mean for banks? Is there sort of a competition between banks and P2P and ECF platforms?
Actually, I think they are competing, yes, because at the end of the day, the SME company, they have a few options, right? They can go to either the financing platform and they can go to the bank. But again, to banks, I don't think SME, this segment is too big for them. But of course, now some people point out that because we have a lower interest rate now, so banks would have an advantage now, and people maybe will go to the if you think your quality is good enough, maybe you'll go to the bank. Then the not so good quality, maybe they'll have to go for the what they call alternative financing platforms.
All right, because in your story, right, someone that you spoke to mentioned something about the P2P and ECF situation in Indonesia, where they are seeing a negative impact on non-performing loans. So. Yeah. For Malaysia, is it something that we should worry about?
Of course, but at this point in time, we only have talked about 900 companies, right? And we only have 20 platforms. So I think the whole situation is manageable, and we are the first ASEAN country to regulate it, which is a good thing. So if you look at default rate, funding societies, for instance, is 1%. So I think it's safe to say that maybe the investment. Okay, chances of winning, chances of making money, I wouldn't say it's very high.
Okay. Okay.
But based on the default rate of 1%, I would say chances of losing money is rather low now as compared to Indonesia or China. They are cracking down because they don't regulate. You see the China P2P lending industry, they don't regulate it. So there are a lot of Ponzi scheme and all these things happening.
And at least ours is backed up by the SC. Okay. So most of the people you spoke to agreed on one thing, which is there is a need to raise awareness because there is this perception that P2P and ECF are the modern day loan sharks. So how do we change this perception?
There's no awareness, so we have to raise the awareness and investor education. But I mean, to be fair, we are only 2-3 years old, so I think so far it's okay. Just need a little bit of more investor education, and not just that. Of course, also from the company's perspective, more need to be done to tell this SME that hey, there is another option. Why don't you look into this financing platform?
Okay. So whose role is it?
I think platform operators have to work together with regulators. I think, for instance, funding societies, they are working together with SC and also Bank Negara Malaysia to do some roadshows and industry events. Yeah.
For more on the stories, pick up a copy of The Age Weekly at all good newsstands.